I watched them through the window of the upscale restaurant, champagne glasses clinking as my husband of 12 years, Michael, leaned across the table to wipe sauce from Vanessa's lip. His financial advisor and the woman he'd been secretly transferring our life savings to for months. They were celebrating something special tonight, evident by the small velvet box between them, completely unaware that 3 hours earlier, I had frozen every account he had access to. Michael never suspected that his supportive housewife was actually a former forensic accountant who specialized in financial fraud investigations, and I had just orchestrated a reckoning that would expose a scheme far more elaborate than their affair. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The first suspicious transaction appeared on a Tuesday in March. I was paying our monthly bills, a routine task I'd handled throughout our marriage, when I noticed a transfer from our joint savings account, $8,500 to an account I didn't recognize. The description was vague, investment opportunity, which was unusual since Michael typically discussed any investment moves with me first. We lived in a spacious colonial home in the suburbs of Boston, a life we'd built meticulously together. I had stepped back from my career at Wilson & Blackmore Financial Investigations when our twins, Ellie and Noah, were born 8 years ago. Michael continued climbing the ranks at Apex Consulting, eventually making partner 2 years prior. Crow. Paper? We were the perfect upper-middle-class family. It must be that tech startup he mentioned last month, I reasoned to myself, filing it away to ask about later. That evening, Michael came home later than usual, his shirt collar slightly askew and the faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume lingering on his blazer. I recognized the signs. After all, I'd been trained to notice discrepancies, but pushed the thought away. We'd been through a rough patch since his promotion, which required more travel and longer hours, but I'd attributed it to normal marriage growing pains. "How was your day?" I asked casually while setting the table for dinner. "Productive." Closed the Westridge account finally. He loosened his tie and poured himself a generous glass of scotch. "Where are the kids?" "At my mom's for the night. I thought we could have dinner, just us." Michael nodded absently, already scrolling through his phone. "Actually, I have some emails to catch up on. Mind if I eat in the office?" I watched him retreat down the hallway, plate in hand, without mentioning the transfer. It was unlike him to make financial moves without discussion, especially ones involving our children's college fund. The next morning, while Michael was in the shower, I did something I hadn't done in years. I checked his phone. The passcode hadn't changed since we first got married, our anniversary date. The message thread with V was at the top of his recent conversations. "Dinner was perfect. You're perfect. Tuesday can't come soon enough." My stomach clenched, but I kept scrolling until I found what I was looking for. A message from 3 weeks earlier. "Transfer went through. We're up to $42,000 now. 6 more months at this rate and we'll have enough." My forensic training kicked in immediately. I needed evidence, not confrontation. I carefully returned the phone to his nightstand and began formulating a plan. That day, I reactivated old connections. Rachel Torres, my former colleague at Wilson and Blackmore, met me for coffee near her office. "Rebecca? It's been ages. How are the twins?" She embraced me warmly. "Growing too fast," I replied, settling into a corner table away from other patrons. "I need your help, Rachel. Off the record." Her expression shifted to concern. "Of course. What's going on?" I slid a piece of paper across the table with the account number from the transfer. "I need to know who this belongs to, and I need complete transaction history for the past year." Rachel studied my face. "This has to do with Michael, doesn't it?" I nodded, keeping my voice steady. "Just gathering information before I make any decisions?" "This isn't exactly within protocol," she hesitated. "No. But we've known each other for 15 years. You were at my wedding." Rachel tucked the paper into her purse. Give me 48 hours. While I waited for Rachel's information, I created a detailed spreadsheet of our finances: joint checking, savings, investment accounts, retirement funds, credit, cards, everything. I documented normal spending patterns and flagged every deviation over the past year. The pattern emerged clearly. Every third Tuesday, exactly $8,500 disappeared from our accounts, labeled as investment opportunity or portfolio diversification. The transfers had started small, $2,000, then $3,500, gradually increasing as Michael gained confidence that I wasn't paying close attention. In total, $76,500 had vanished over 9 months. Our children's college fund was down by a third. Rachel's call came the following afternoon. "Can you meet now?" We reconvened at a different coffee shop, farther from her office. She looked troubled as she passed me a sealed envelope. The account belongs to Vanessa Prescott, 34, financial advisor at Kingsley Wealth Management. Rachel kept her voice low. She specializes in high net worth clients and investment strategies. The name hit me like a physical blow. I knew Vanessa. She had been at our holiday party the previous December. Michael had introduced her as a consultant helping with his firm's retirement planning. "There's more," Rachel continued. "The money isn't sitting in her account. Within 24 hours of each transfer, it moves to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. That's where I hit a wall. It would take a court order to trace further." "What about Vanessa's background? Anything unusual?" My training guided my questions despite the personal devastation unfolding. Clean record professionally. But she has an interesting pattern. In the past 5 years, she's worked closely with 3 other executives, all married men, all going through divorces now. I thanked Rachel, my mind already calculating next steps. This wasn't just an affair. The methodical movement of money suggested something more calculated. At home, I created a secure email account and transferred copies of all our financial records, text message screenshots, and the information Rachel had provided. Then I made an appointment with Diane Hammond, the most ruthless divorce attorney in Boston. Diane's office overlooked Boston Harbor, the waterfront view a stark contrast to the conversation we were having. "So you haven't confronted him yet," Diane confirmed, reviewing my documentation with an impressed expression. "Smart, very smart." "I need to understand what I'm dealing with first," I explained. "This isn't just about the affair. The money's going somewhere, and I want to know where before he realizes I'm onto him." Diane nodded. "Based on what you've shown me, we could argue financial fraud in addition to infidelity. But we need more evidence of their plans for this money." "What are my options for protecting what's left?" I asked. "Legally, you have several. As his spouse, you can contest any unusual withdrawals if you can prove they weren't for family benefit." She leaned forward. "But unofficially, I'd suggest you beat him at his own game." A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. That evening, I made a call to our bank's fraud department. As a joint account holder, I reported suspicious activity and requested a temporary freeze on all transfers out of our accounts. For verification, they asked security questions I knew by heart. Michael's mother's maiden name, the street where he grew up, our wedding anniversary. "We'll place a 72-hour security hold, Mrs. Chen," the representative assured me. "Any attempted transfers during this time will be flagged for manual review." Next, I called our investment management company and changed the authentication requirements. Going forward, any withdrawal over $1,000 would require dual authorization codes sent to both our phones. Finally, I activated the emergency plan I'd created years ago when I still worked in financial fraud, a separate account in my name alone, with enough funds to support the children and myself for 6 months if necessary. All this happened while Michael was on a business trip to New York, a trip I now knew, thanks to the Find My Phone feature we'd never disabled, was actually taking place just 30 minutes away at the Harbor View Hotel. As I finished securing our financial safeguards, a text arrived from Michael. "Working late on the presentation. Don't wait up." I sent a simple reply. "Good luck with everything." Then I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to Michael's boss, attaching documentation showing how company funds had been used to book hotel rooms for his rendezvous with Vanessa. I didn't hit send. Not yet. This was simply another piece of leverage for when the time was right. The following morning, I dropped the twins at school and drove to the Harbor View Hotel. I parked my car with a clear view of the entrance and waited. At 9:17 a.m., Michael and Vanessa emerged, his arm around her waist as they laughed about something. He kissed her next to her car, a sleek new Mercedes I suspected our savings had helped purchase. I took photos, adding them to my growing evidence file. Then I followed Vanessa after she left, tracking her to Kingsley Wealth Management's downtown office. While Michael thought I was at my weekly yoga class, I was actually laying the groundwork for what would happen next. What I didn't yet realize was that my husband's financial betrayal was just the visible edge of a scheme that went far beyond our marriage, a scheme that would eventually expose vulnerabilities in the financial system itself, and one that would put everything I cared about at risk. 2 days after I froze our accounts, Michael called me in a panic. I was in our home office, organizing documentation and creating timelines of his financial transgressions when my phone lit up with his name. "Rebecca, something's wrong with our accounts." His voice had that forced calm he used when truly alarmed. "I'm trying to make a transfer, and it says the account is temporarily suspended." I took a deep breath, grateful that this conversation was happening over the phone where he couldn't see my face. "Really? That's strange," I replied, my voice measured. "What are you trying to transfer?" His hesitation was brief but telling. "Just moving some funds between accounts. End-of-month balancing, end-of-month balancing." The audacity of his lie made my fingers tighten around the phone. It was the 16th, and I knew exactly what he was trying to do. Make his regular Tuesday payment? To Vanessa. "Did you call the bank?" I asked innocently. "Yes, they mentioned something about suspicious activity flags. They need to speak with both of us since it's a joint account. Some new security protocol." I allowed a hint of annoyance to enter my voice. "That's inconvenient. I'm taking the kids to my sister's this afternoon for that overnight visit, remember? I won't be able to deal with the bank until at least tomorrow." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. I could almost hear him calculating whether he could wait another day to transfer the money, or if Vanessa would become suspicious. "It's kind of important, Becca," he finally said, using my nickname, something he hadn't done in months. "Could you possibly stop by the bank before you leave? It would really help me out." "I'll try," I replied non-committally. "But Jennifer is expecting us by 4, and I still need to pack the kids' things." After disconnecting, I checked the banking app. There it was, a rejected transfer attempt for $10,000, up from his usual $8,500. They were accelerating their timeline. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "You need to see this. Lunch at 1?" We met at a quiet corner table at Westfield's, a restaurant far enough from both Michael's office and my neighborhood to avoid chance encounters. Rachel passed me a manila envelope under the table. "Vanessa Prescott isn't just a financial advisor. She's been involved in at least 3 high-value divorces in the past 5 years." "Yes, you mentioned that," I said, opening the envelope. "What I didn't mention is that in each case she was more than just the other woman. She was a financial accomplice." Rachel kept her voice low. "She helps wealthy men hide assets before their divorces. In exchange, she gets a percentage and apparently a romantic relationship while it lasts." Inside the envelope were copies of financial statements, property records, and a background report on Vanessa. One document in particular caught my attention: a deed to a vacation property in Vermont purchased 8 months ago. "The cabin is owned by a shell company," Rachel explained. But guess who authorized the purchase? Vanessa Prescott, acting as financial advisor to the company. The purchase price was $780,000, all cash, no mortgage. I studied the document. The timing coincides with when Michael's transfers began. That's not all, Rachel continued. The shell company has 3 other properties, all purchased within the last 3 years. Total value, approximately $3.2 million. And you think my husband's money is funding these purchases? He's certainly contributing. But I think Vanessa has multiple clients. Or victims, depending on how you look at it. She creates investment vehicles that hide assets during divorce proceedings, then either sells the properties later or uses them as income-generating rentals that funnel money back to her clients after their divorces are finalized. I thought about the $76,500 Michael had already transferred. A substantial sum for us, but just a fraction of the property values Rachel was describing. So I'm not the first wife she's helped rob, I said, a cold anger settling in my chest. No. But you might be the first one who can stop her. That afternoon, instead of taking the children to my sister's as I'd told Michael, I visited Granite Trust Bank and met with the branch manager, Stanley Winters. I'd prepared for this meeting carefully, bringing copies of account statements, transfer records, and our marriage certificate. Mrs. Chen, these are serious allegations, Mr. Winters said after I explained the situation. You're essentially asking us to permanently restrict your husband's access to joint accounts. Not permanently, I clarified. Just until I can secure legal protections. The funds he's transferring are from our children's college accounts and our retirement savings. I have documentation showing the money is being moved offshore within hours of each transfer. Mr. Winters reviewed the paperwork, his frown deepening. Normally, we would require a court order for this kind of action. However, given the evidence of potential financial fraud, he looked up at me. We can extend the security hold for 2 weeks under our fraud protection protocols. That should give you time to obtain the necessary legal documentation. Thank you, I said, relief washing over me. One more thing. I'd like to open a separate account in my name only. By the time I left the bank, I had secured our remaining assets and opened a new account with funds transferred from my emergency savings. Michael would be locked out of accessing our joint funds for at least 2 weeks, and I had established financial independence. I picked up the twins from school, and we did go to my sister Jennifer's house, not for an overnight stay, but for a family discussion I'd been dreading. Jennifer had always been my confidant, the person who knew me best. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and immediately sent the children to play with their cousins in the backyard. "What's wrong?" she asked, leading me to her kitchen. I placed my folder of evidence on the counter. Michael's having an affair with his financial advisor. They've been systematically draining our accounts. Jennifer's shock quickly gave way to anger. "That bastard! Have you confronted him?" "Not yet." I explained my strategy of gathering evidence first. "I need you to keep the kids this weekend. I told Michael they're staying with you, but I need the freedom to move without them witnessing any of this." "Of course," Jennifer agreed immediately. "Stay here too. You shouldn't be alone in that house with him once he realizes what you've done." I shook my head. "I need to be there. The moment he realizes he can't access the money, he'll try to find another way. I need to see what he does, who he contacts." Jennifer studied my face. "This isn't just about catching him in the affair, is it? You're building a case." "It's bigger than just our marriage," I confirmed. "From what I've uncovered, Vanessa Prescott has been running this scheme with multiple men. She helps them hide assets before divorces, probably takes a cut, and then helps them recover the money after settlements are finalized." "And you're going after her too," Jennifer realized. "I'm going after everyone involved," I said quietly, "including Michael's firm if they've been complicit. These accounts she's using, they're sophisticated. This isn't amateur hour. There's a possibility corporate funds are being used as well. That evening, I returned home without the children, explaining to Michael that they were staying an extra night at Jennifer's because their cousins had tickets to a baseball game the next day. The bank situation is resolved, I told him casually. Just some automated security flag. Everything should be normal by tomorrow. Michael's relief was palpable. Great. I was worried we'd been hacked or something. Actually, I said, testing. Him? They mentioned there had been some unusual transfers over the past few months, large amounts to an account they didn't recognize. I told them it must be your investment project. I watched his face carefully, noting the micro expressions of panic before he composed himself. Right. Those are the tech fund investments I told you about. High-yield opportunity with one of our clients. He loosened his tie, a nervous habit. We should see returns by year-end. The ease with which he lied to my face confirmed everything. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a one-time betrayal. This was a calculated deception. Sounds promising, I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I'm heading to bed early. Don't forget the twins have their science fair tomorrow afternoon. Right, the science fair, he mumbled, already reaching for his phone. As I climbed the stairs, I heard him stepping onto the back patio, his voice too low to make out the words. I knew he was calling Vanessa, probably to assure her the money would come through tomorrow. Little did he know, tomorrow would bring a very different kind of revelation. In the privacy of our bedroom, I opened my laptop and accessed the tracking software I'd installed on Michael's phone when he was in the shower that morning. A necessary invasion of privacy given the circumstances. His text messages with Vanessa appeared on my screen, confirming my suspicions about their plans. Michael. Money should be available tomorrow. False alarm with the bank. Vanessa. Good. The closing is scheduled for Friday. We need the funds by then. Michael. Won't be a problem. Have you looked at properties in Bermuda yet, Vanessa? Several options. Once this deal closes, we'll have enough for the down payment. Michael. I can't wait to leave all this behind. Just a few more months of pretending. I leaned back against the headboard, a strange calm settling over me. They weren't just stealing our money, they were planning a new life together, funded by my children's future and our retirement savings. Tomorrow, Michael would attempt to transfer the funds again. And tomorrow, he would discover just how thoroughly I had outmaneuvered him. What he still didn't know was that I had only revealed the first layer of my strategy. The real countermove was yet to come. The following morning, I woke before Michael. Wednesday, typically his early day at the office. I lay still, listening to him shower and dress, tracking his movements through our home with heightened awareness. When he entered the bedroom to collect his watch and wallet, I pretended to be just waking up. Have a good day, I murmured sleepily. Don't forget I have that alumni lunch today, so I'll be home late. Michael nodded, barely looking at me. I might work late too. Don't wait up for dinner. Work late. The familiar code for meeting Vanessa. As soon as I heard his car pull out of the driveway, I sprang into action. First, I called Diane Hammond's office to confirm our emergency meeting at 10 a.m. Then I forwarded the latest text messages between Michael and Vanessa to my secure email account. Finally, I packed a small overnight bag and hid it in my car trunk, just in case things escalated quickly. At precisely 9:15 a.m., my phone rang. The bank's automated fraud alert system. This is an alert from Granite Trust Bank regarding accounts, ending in 4735. A transfer attempt for $10,000 has been declined due to security restrictions on this account. If this was not you, please contact our fraud department immediately. I smiled grimly. Michael was right on schedule, trying to transfer funds to Vanessa. Within minutes, my phone lit up with his call. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. Rebecca, it's me. There's still some issue with the accounts, Call me as soon as you get this. It's important. His voice had an edge of desperation I'd never heard before. Good. At Diane Hammond's office, I laid out everything I'd discovered. The ongoing transfers, the property purchases through shell companies, the planned escape to Bermuda. This is extraordinary, Diane said, examining the Vermont property records. Most spouses attempting to hide assets aren't this sophisticated. They usually just undervalue property or stash cash. This is a multi-layered scheme. What's our next step? I asked. I've drafted emergency motions to freeze all marital assets and for temporary financial restraints, she explained, pushing documents across her desk. We'll file today, but there's something else we should consider. What's that? Criminal charges, Diane said bluntly. What you're describing goes beyond divorce asset concealment. This is systematic fraud, potentially money laundering. We should speak with the district attorney's office. The suggestion caught me off guard. I had been focused on protecting our assets and preparing for divorce, not on sending Michael to prison. Let me think about that, I said hesitantly. I need to consider how it would affect the children. Diane nodded. Of course. But consider this. If Vanessa Prescott has done this before, there are other families who've been victimized. Your evidence could help them too. As I left Diane's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Urgent. Kingsley Wealth under C. Federal investigation? Call me. I ducked into a coffee shop and called her immediately. The SEC opened an investigation into Kingsley 3 weeks ago, Rachel said without preamble. Apparently, several clients have filed complaints about unauthorized transactions and missing funds. Does this involve Vanessa? Not directly, at least not in the public filings. But it gets more interesting, Rachel continued. Guess who sits on Kingsley's compliance committee? A chill ran down my spine. Michael. Exactly. Your husband is part of the team responsible for ensuring the firm follows financial regulations. The implications were staggering. If Michael was facilitating fraudulent transactions while serving on the compliance committee, he wasn't just betraying me, he was potentially complicit in a much larger financial crime. There's more, Rachel added. I did some digging into the property purchases. The shell company that owns the Vermont cabin? It's registered to a holding company that lists Edward Kingsley as its primary officer. Edward Kingsley? As in the founder of Kingsley Wealth? The very same. Your husband's girlfriend isn't just running a side hustle for cheating spouses. She's involved in something much bigger. My mind raced. What had seemed like a devastating personal betrayal was expanding into something far more complex and dangerous. If Kingsley Wealth was under federal investigation, and Michael and Vanessa were connected to suspicious property purchases linked to the firm's founder, Rachel, I need you to be careful with this information, I warned. If this is as big as it seems, powerful people might be involved. Already taking precautions, she assured me. What will you do now? I need to change tactics, I replied. This isn't just about catching Michael and Vanessa anymore. I need to understand exactly what they're involved in before I make my next move. After ending the call, I sat in the coffee shop reassessing everything. The alumni lunch I'd mentioned to Michael was fictitious, a cover story to explain my absence. Now, instead of following my original plan to confront him, I decided to conduct some field research. Kingsley Wealth Management occupied 3 floors of a gleaming tower in Boston's financial district. I dressed professionally in a suit I hadn't worn since leaving my career, applied makeup carefully, and styled my hair differently than usual. With oversized designer sunglasses and a confident stride, I entered the building at 1:30 p.m. The reception area of Kingsley Wealth exuded old money, charm, leather furniture, oil paintings, and discreet signage. The young receptionist smiled professionally. Welcome to Kingsley Wealth Management. How may I help you? I have an appointment with Vanessa Prescott, I stated confidently. Caroline Westbrook. The name was fiction, but my demeanor sold it. The receptionist checked her computer. "I don't see an appointment, but let me call Ms. Prescott's assistant." While she made the call, I surveyed the space, noting the exits, the security cameras, and the framed photographs displaying Edward Kingsley with various political figures. "Ms. Prescott is currently with a client," the receptionist informed me. "Her assistant asks if you can wait about 15 minutes?" "Of course," I smiled, taking a seat with a clear view of both the elevator bank and the hallway leading to the offices. Precisely 17 minutes later, a door opened down the hallway, and Vanessa emerged, escorting an elderly gentleman toward the reception area. She was striking in person, tall, immaculately dressed in a tailored navy suit, with a confident bearing that commanded attention. I studied her carefully from behind my sunglasses, memorizing details. After bidding farewell to her client, Vanessa approached the reception desk. "Caroline Westbrook? I don't believe we have an appointment." I stood, removing my sunglasses. "We don't, but I think we should talk." Her expression shifted subtly as she realized who I was. A flicker of recognition, quickly masked by professional composure. "Mrs. Chen," she said smoothly. "What an unexpected pleasure." "Is there somewhere private we can speak?" I asked, maintaining the calm demeanor I'd perfected during years of financial investigations. Vanessa assessed me for a moment, then nodded. "Of course. Please follow me." She led me to a small conference room, closing the door behind us. The space was elegant but windowless, a room designed for discretion. "How can I help you, Mrs. Chen?" Vanessa asked, taking a seat across from me, her posture relaxed but alert. "You can start by explaining why my husband has transferred $76,500 of our savings to your personal account over the past 9 months, I replied evenly. If she was surprised by my directness, she didn't show it. "Michael has been making investments through our firm. The transactions are completely legitimate." "Legitimate investments don't move offshore within 24 hours of receipt," I countered. "Nor do they fund cash purchases of Vermont cabin properties through shell companies linked to Edward Kingsley." That landed. A slight widening of her eyes betrayed her shock that I had connected these dots. "Mrs. Chen," she began, her tone shifting to one of practiced sympathy. "I understand divorce can be emotionally difficult, but making unfounded accusations—" "Let me be clear," I interrupted. "I'm not here as a jealous wife. I'm here as a former forensic accountant who has documented every transaction, traced every shell company, and compiled enough evidence to interest not just my divorce attorney, but potentially the SEC and FBI. Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. "The SEC? This is absurd. You're overreacting to a personal situation." "Am I?" I removed a folded document from my purse and slid it across the table. "This is a copy of the deed for Lakeview Property Holdings purchase in Vermont. Coincidentally, $75,000 of my family's money disappeared around the same time as the down payment. Care to explain that?" She didn't touch the document, but her gaze lingered on it. "What exactly do you want, Mrs. Chen?" "Initially, I wanted to understand why my husband was betraying our family. Now, I want to know what you and Michael are really involved in. Because whatever it is, it's bigger than an affair and some hidden assets." A calculating look crossed Vanessa's face. "You seem like an intelligent woman. Surely you understand that some matters are better left unexplored. Is that a threat?" "It's advice," she replied coolly. "For your own benefit." I leaned forward. "Here's my advice to you. Whatever you and Michael are planning, whatever Friday's transfer was meant to fund, it's not happening. The accounts are frozen, legal motions are being filed as we speak, and your pattern of behavior with previous clients has been documented." For the first time, real alarm showed in Vanessa's expression. "Previous clients? What are you talking about?" "You've played this game before," I said. 3 times that I know of. Wealthy married men, financial entanglements, Divorces where substantial assets mysteriously disappear. Did you think no one would notice the pattern? Vanessa stood, abruptly. This meeting is over. I suggest you speak to Michael about any concerns regarding your marital finances. As she reached for the door, I delivered my parting shot. The Vermont property. Is that where you were planning to meet this weekend? It would be a shame if local authorities had reason to search it before your arrival. She froze, her back to me. When she turned, her expression had transformed into something harder, more dangerous. Mrs. Chen, you have no idea what you're interfering with. For your children's sake, I suggest you drop this immediately. With that, she opened the door and strode away, leaving me alone in the conference room. I had come seeking answers but had instead stumbled into something far more treacherous than I anticipated. Vanessa's parting words weren't just the defensiveness of a woman caught in an affair, they carried the weight of a genuine warning. As I left the building, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Emergency. Meet at the cabin. Bring nothing. Tell no one. My husband was panicking, exactly as I had intended. But something in Vanessa's reaction suggested that I had unwittingly stepped into a situation more dangerous than a simple betrayal. What had started as a mission to catch a cheating spouse was evolving into something that felt increasingly like a financial thriller, one where I couldn't be certain who the real villains were or how far they would go to protect their secrets. Michael's text about the cabin created a dilemma. Every instinct told me not to meet him alone, especially now that I understood the potential scope of what I was dealing with. Yet the cabin might contain evidence critical to understanding the full extent of his involvement with Kingsley Wealth. I called Rachel from my car. I need a favor, I said without preamble. Can you track a location for me? I'm sending you coordinates. Is this about Michael? Yes, he wants to meet at a cabin. I'm not going, but I want to know if he actually goes there. Give me the details, she replied. And Rebecca? Be careful. If Kingsley Wealth is involved in something illegal, these aren't people who play by the rules. After sending Rachel the cabin's location, I drove to Jennifer's house to check on the twins. They were happily playing a board game with their cousins, blissfully unaware of the storm engulfing their parents' lives. Any developments? Jennifer asked quietly as we watched the children from the kitchen doorway. More than I expected, I admitted, giving her a condensed version of my discoveries. I think Michael and Vanessa are caught in something bigger than they anticipated, and now they're scrambling. What's your next move? I sighed, feeling the weight of each decision. I need to recover any evidence before Michael destroys it. Our home office might have documents he doesn't realize are important. Jennifer frowned. You shouldn't go back to the house alone. I won't be alone, I assured her. I've asked Diane to send her private investigator to meet me there. He'll wait outside while I gather what I need. The lie came easily. I had no intention of involving anyone else yet, not until I understood exactly what we were dealing with. The fewer people who knew my movements, the better. I hugged the twins, promising to pick them up the following afternoon, then headed toward our suburban home. During the drive, Rachel called with an update. Michael's car is on the move, she reported, heading northwest out of the city. The cabin is in that direction. Is he alone? Can't confirm that from the GPS. Want me to see if I can access traffic cameras along the route? No, I decided quickly. That's too risky. Just let me know if his location changes significantly. At home, I parked a block away and observed the house for 20 minutes. No unusual vehicles, no signs of activity. Satisfied it was safe, I entered through the side door using my key. The house felt different somehow, the familiar spaces now loaded with suspicion. I moved efficiently, starting with our shared home office. Michael's desk was meticulously organized as always, but several files were missing from his cabinet, files I'd cataloged just days earlier containing our investment records and property documents. In their place was a single USB drive labeled Backup. I pocketed it without connecting it to any device. I'd examine its contents later from a secure computer. Next, I checked Michael's nightstand, empty except for reading glasses and innocuous personal items. The closet revealed nothing unusual until I examined his collection of suit jackets. In the inside pocket of his least-worn blazer, I found a small black notebook containing handwritten codes and numbers, possibly account information or passwords. The basement storage room was my final stop. We kept family financial records in fireproof boxes organized by year. The most recent box was significantly lighter than it should have been. Opening it confirmed my suspicion. Mortgage statements, tax returns, and investment summaries from the past year were missing. As I replaced the box, my phone vibrated with a text from Rachel. M has arrived at cabin location. Second vehicle. Present. Silver Audi registered to V. Prescott. So they were meeting after all. I texted back, "Anything else?" A minute later, third vehicle arrived. Black SUV, tinted windows. Can't identify occupants. That was unexpected. Who else was involved in their meeting? I felt a prickling sensation at the back of my neck, the investigator's instinct that had served me well in my former career. I was about to head upstairs when I heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into our driveway. Quickly moving to the window, I saw a vehicle I didn't recognize. A dark sedan with government plates. Federal agents? Already? That seemed premature given the timeline of my legal filings. I slipped out the back door and circled around the side of the house, staying hidden behind the landscaping. Two men in dark suits approached the front door, their bearing unmistakably official. One rang the doorbell while the other surveyed the property. Rather than reveal myself, I retreated further into the shadows, making my way to the neighbor's yard and then circling back to where I'd parked my car. As I drove away, I called Diane. "Did you contact federal authorities about Michael?" I asked when she answered. "No," she replied, sounding concerned. "The paperwork is still being processed." "Why?" "Because there are federal agents at my house. Right now. Either someone else reported him or something bigger is happening." "Get to my office," Diane instructed. "We need to reevaluate our strategy." Instead of heading directly to Diane's, I drove to a small electronics shop in Cambridge run by Sam Parker, a former colleague who specialized in digital forensics. "Rebecca Chen," Sam grinned as I entered his cluttered shop. "Still married to that investment guy?" "Technically, yes. That's actually related to why I'm here." I placed the USB drive on his counter. "I need to know what's on this, but I don't want to connect it to any device that could be traced back to me." Sam's expression turned serious. "That sounds ominous, like the old days. Legal or not so legal?" "Complicated," I admitted. "But I'm not breaking any laws by viewing my husband's files." Sam took the drive and disappeared into his back room, returning 15 minutes later with a printout and a new USB drive. "It's encrypted but not with anything sophisticated," he explained. "Mostly financial records, property documents, and some correspondence. I've copied the decrypted files to this new drive and printed the most relevant-looking documents." I scanned the printout, my breath catching as I recognized what I was seeing. Detailed records of financial transactions involving not just Michael and Vanessa, but at least 6 other Kingsley executives. The amounts were staggering, totaling over $30 million funneled through various shell companies over 3 years. "Sam, this is bigger than I thought," I murmured. "Yeah, I got that impression." He pointed to one document. "That's a property in the Caymans, purchased through 7 different entities to obscure ownership. Classic layering technique for money laundering." I stared at the extensive network of transactions, properties, and offshore accounts. My husband wasn't just having an affair and hiding assets. He was part of a sophisticated financial crime operation. "Sam, I need one more favor. Can you make copies of everything and store them securely? If anything happens to me..." "Nothing's going to happen to you," he interrupted firmly. Probably not, I agreed. But I'd feel better knowing the information. Is backed up. As I left Sam's shop, my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Chen? A male voice inquired. This is Special Agent Marcus Donovan with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to speak with you regarding Kingsley Wealth Management and your husband's activities. My heart raced. How did you get this number? Your attorney Diane Hammond provided it. She's here with me now. Can you come to our field office? I hesitated, suspicious of the timing. I'd like to speak with Diane first. Of course. A moment later, Diane's familiar voice came on the line. Rebecca, it's me. The FBI has been investigating Kingsley Wealth for months. They want to talk to you about Michael's involvement. How did they know to contact you? They didn't. I contacted them after you called about the agents at your house. Turns out those weren't FBI, at least not from Donovan's team. We need to figure out who they were. The implications were disturbing. If they weren't the FBI, who were the men at my house? I'm on my way, I told her, already calculating the safest route to the FBI field office. 20 minutes later, I sat across from Agent Donovan, a serious man with keen eyes and a methodical manner, while Diane sat beside me taking notes. Mrs. Chen, we believe your husband is involved in a sophisticated financial fraud scheme operated through Kingsley Wealth Management, Donovan explained. We've been building a case for 11 months, but we've hit barriers accessing certain accounts and properties. Because they're hidden behind layers of shell companies, I suggested. Donovan nodded appreciatively. Exactly. Your background in forensic accounting makes you uniquely positioned to help us connect some dots. What exactly do you need from me? Information about properties, accounts, anything you've discovered while investigating your husband's activities. We're particularly interested in the Vermont property and a recent attempted transfer of $10,000. The specificity of his knowledge was reassuring. This wasn't a fishing expedition. I placed Sam's printouts on the table. This is what I found today. Financial records showing transactions between Kingsley executives and multiple shell companies. The total exceeds $30 million. Donovan examined the documents, his expression revealing nothing. Where did you obtain these? From my home office. My husband left a USB drive in his desk. Not entirely true, but close enough. And the property in Vermont? Purchased through a shell company connected to Edward Kingsley, funded partly with money from our family accounts. My husband and Vanessa Prescott are meeting there now, along with someone in a black SUV. Donovan exchanged glances with another agent. We have a team near that location. Mrs. Chen, would you be willing to make a formal statement? I will, I agreed. But first I need assurances about my children's safety. If Michael realizes I'm cooperating with federal authorities, we understand. Your concerns, Donovan interrupted. We can arrange protective details for you and your family. Your cooperation could be crucial in bringing this operation down. As I provided my formal statement, detailing everything from the initial suspicious transfers to my confrontation with Vanessa, a part of me struggled to reconcile the Michael I had married with the man who had become entangled in this web of financial crimes. What had started as a simple desire to protect my family's assets had evolved into something I never anticipated, becoming an informant in a federal investigation that could send my children's father to prison. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Something's happening at the cabin. Multiple vehicles arriving. Call me. I excused myself briefly and called her from the hallway. What's going on? I asked quietly. 4 more cars arrived in the past 20 minutes, Rachel reported. 2 appear to be law enforcement, light bars visible once they turn into the property. The others look like private vehicles. FBI, I murmured. They're moving in the cabin. Rebecca, what have you gotten yourself into? Rachel's voice held concern. The question is, what did Michael get himself into? I replied. And how do I make sure the children and I aren't collateral damage? As I returned to the interview room, Agent Donovan was reviewing my documents with increased interest. He looked up as I entered. Mrs. Chen, we believe your husband is more than just a participant in this scheme. Based on these transaction records, he appears to be one of its architects. The floor seemed to shift beneath me. What are you saying? I'm saying Michael Chen isn't just following Vanessa Prescott's lead. He created the financial structure that Kingsley Wealth has been using to move millions offshore. He's not a victim or a pawn. He's a principal. The revelation hit me with physical force. The man I had shared my life with for 12 years, the father of my children, hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He had orchestrated a criminal enterprise that had victimized countless others. And now, federal agents were converging on a cabin, where he was meeting with his co-conspirators, unaware that his carefully constructed world was about to collapse. I stared at Agent Donovan, trying to process his words. How could I not have known? I'm a forensic accountant. I lived with him for 12 years. Financial criminals are often most careful with those closest to them, Donovan replied. And from what we've gathered, your husband compartmentalizes his life extremely well. Another agent entered the room and handed Donovan a note. He read it quickly, his expression shifting. What is it? I asked. Our team is in position at the Vermont property, he said. They've confirmed visual on Michael, Chen, Vanessa Prescott, Edward Kingsley, and 3 other Kingsley executives. Diane placed a hand on my arm. Rebecca, you don't have to be involved in this part. But I shook my head. I need to see this through. Donovan studied me for a moment, then nodded. We have a secure observation setup in the next room. You can monitor the operation from there. He led us to a room equipped with multiple screens showing live feeds from body cameras and surveillance positions around the cabin. I watched, mesmerized, as FBI tactical teams took position in the surrounding woods. Through one camera, I could see the cabin's interior through a window, Michael and 5 others seated around a large table covered with documents. We have audio, an FBI technician announced, adjusting controls on a panel. Voices filled the room, slightly distorted but recognizable. Edward Kingsley was speaking. Need to accelerate the timeline. The compliance review is scheduled for next month, and we can't risk exposure. The Bermuda accounts are ready, Michael replied, his voice so familiar yet now carrying an edge I'd never heard before. But we need that final transfer to close the Cayman property deal. That's where we hit a snag, Vanessa interjected. Michael's accounts have been frozen. His wife knows. The room fell silent. I watched as Michael's face contorted with anger. How much does she know? Kingsley demanded. Enough to be a problem, Vanessa admitted. She confronted me today at the size office. She's connected the Vermont property to our operation. Jesus, Michael, one of the other executives exploded. You said you had your house in order. I did, Michael snapped back. Until someone at the bank flagged the transfers. Rebecca isn't a threat. She's just trying to protect her divorce settlement. How little he knew me, even after all these years. We need to contain this, Kingsley declared. If she talks to the authorities... She won't, Michael interrupted. She cares too much about the children's security. Once I explain that her cooperation means a better settlement, she'll back off. The casual confidence with which he planned to manipulate me sent a chill down my spine. And if she doesn't? Asked one of the other men. Michael's expression hardened. Then we use the contingency plan, the offshore account in her name, the backdated transfers. If she pushes, she goes down with us. My breath caught. They were setting me up as a fall person, I whispered to Diane. On the screen, Kingsley opened a laptop. Let's finalize the document transfers while we're here. Once the Cayman property closes, we'll have successfully moved $18 million beyond regulatory reach. That's enough, Donovan said to the technician. Give the go signal. On the screens, we watched as FBI agents emerged from the woods surrounding the cabin. Through the window camera, we saw the exact moment when Michael realized what was happening. His face draining of color as figures in FBI jackets appeared at every window. FBI, open the door! The command boomed through external speakers. Inside, panic erupted. Two executives lunged for laptops while Kingsley reached inside his jacket. Vanessa froze in place, eyes wide with shock. And Michael dove for a briefcase, pulling out documents and shoving them into a fireplace. Where flames already danced, agents breached the doors simultaneously. Federal agents! Hands up! Step away from the fire! I watched as my husband was forced to the ground, hands zip-tied behind his back, face pressed against the rustic wooden floor of the cabin where he'd planned to escape with another woman and millions in stolen funds. Vanessa was similarly restrained, her composed demeanor finally cracking as she was guided outside. Kingsley attempted to resist, resulting in a brief struggle before he too was subdued. The entire operation took less than 4 minutes. Mrs. Chen, Agent Donovan said quietly, "We'll need you to identify the documents they were attempting to destroy." I nodded numbly, still processing the scene I'd witnessed. The man on that screen, calculating, deceptive, willing to frame his children's mother to save himself, was a stranger wearing my husband's face. While the FBI processed the scene at the cabin, I returned home with a protective detail. 2 agents who would remain with me until the immediate investigation concluded. The house felt cavernous and empty, filled with memories now tainted by deception. Rachel arrived shortly after, ignoring the agents to wrap me in a tight hug. "I just heard. Are you okay?" "I don't know what I am," I admitted. "Everything I thought I knew about my life has been a lie." We sat in the kitchen while I recounted the day's events, from discovering the USB drive to watching the FBI raid. "He was going to frame me," I said, still struggling with reality. "Create evidence that I was involved. Use it as leverage if I didn't cooperate." "Bastard," Rachel muttered. "After everything, he was still playing you." My phone rang. Diane. With an update. The U.S. Attorney's Office is filing charges tomorrow morning. Wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, securities fraud. They're requesting no bail based on flight risk. "What happens next?" I asked. "Michael and the others are being processed now. The FBI recovered most of the documents from the fireplace, plus all the electronic evidence from their devices. Based on what they've found, they're expanding the investigation to include other Kingsley executives and possibly some of their clients." "And the money? Our savings that Michael transferred?" "They'll trace what they can," Diane explained. "The good news is that because you froze the accounts when you did, the last transfer never went through. That $10,000 is still safely in your account. For the earlier transfers, we'll file to have those funds considered stolen assets and returned to you as the victim." Victim. The word stuck in my throat. I had never seen myself as a victim. Not when I discovered the affair, not when I found the financial transfers. I had been a strategist, an investigator, a woman taking control of a crisis. But now, hearing the legal classification, the weight of Michael's betrayal hit me anew. After ending the call with Diane, I checked on the agents stationed outside, then went upstairs to the twins' rooms. Sitting on Ellie's bed, surrounded by her stuffed animals and science project medals, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not just for the marriage I'd lost, but for the innocence my children would lose when they learned the truth about their father. The following morning brought another revelation. Agent Donovan arrived with a thick folder of documents recovered from the cabin. "Mrs. Chen, we found something you should see," he said, placing a document on the kitchen table. It was a life insurance policy on me, taken out 6 months earlier, with Michael as the sole beneficiary. The amount, $3 million. "This by itself isn't unusual," Donovan explained. "Many spouses have insurance policies, but we also found this." He showed me a series of emails between Michael and a man identified only as consultant. discussing what appeared to be arrangements for an accident to occur during a planned family vacation to Costa Rica, a trip Michael had been pushing me to book for the upcoming school break. The room seemed to tilt as the implications became clear. He was planning to. I couldn't finish the sentence. We can't prove intent definitively, Donovan said carefully. But given the context and timing, we're investigating this as a possible conspiracy to commit murder. The final piece clicked into place. Michael hadn't just been stealing our savings, he'd been creating a future where I wasn't in the picture at all, where our children would grow up without their mother, believing she had died in a tragic accident, never knowing their father had orchestrated it. There's one more thing, Donovan added, his tone gentler. We found records of a second property purchased 3 months ago, a beachfront villa in Bermuda. The deed lists Michael Chen and Vanessa Prescott as co-owners but with different names. They had established new identities, complete with passports and banking records. They were planning to disappear, I realized. Once they had moved enough money, I couldn't say it. It appears so, Donovan confirmed. The good news is that we've frozen all associated accounts and properties. They won't be accessing any of those funds. After Agent Donovan left, I sat alone in the kitchen, trying to reconcile everything I'd learned. The man I had married, the man who had held my hand through 20 hours of labor with our twins, who had nursed me through pneumonia 3 years ago, who had seemed devastated when my father died, had been planning my death while transferring our savings to fund a new life with another woman. The coldness of it was incomprehensible. Had I ever really known him? Has anything in our life together been real? I called Jennifer, asking her to keep the twins another day. Then I drove to my sister's house and sat the children down for the hardest conversation of my life. Daddy has done something wrong, I began carefully, holding their small hands in mine. He took money that didn't belong to him, and he lied. To a lot of people. The police have had to take him away for a while. Ellie's face crumpled immediately, while Noah's eyes widened with confusion. Is Daddy a bad guy now? He asked. How could I answer that? How could I explain the complexities of a man who had read them bedtime stories while simultaneously planning to leave them motherless? People sometimes make very bad choices, I said finally. Even people who love us. Daddy made some terrible choices, and now there are consequences. But no matter what happens, I will always be here for you both. As I held my crying children, I realized that despite everything Michael had done, the betrayal, the theft, the unthinkable plans, the greatest crime was what he had been willing to do to these innocent children who adored him. Not just taking their college funds, but planning to take their mother, all while preparing to vanish from their lives. That night, after the twins had finally fallen asleep in Jennifer's guest room, I sat on her back porch watching the stars and made a promise to myself. We would survive this. We would rebuild. And somehow, someday, I would help my children understand that the monster in this story wasn't who their father became, but the choices he made along the way. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Just heard from my contact. They found offshore accounts totaling $4.3 million linked directly to Michael. When this is done, you and the kids will be financially secure. A bitter comfort, but comfort nonetheless. At least Michael's betrayal wouldn't leave us destitute. As I looked up at the night sky, I felt something unexpected stirring beneath the pain and shock, the first tentative awakening of freedom. Freedom from lies, from betrayal, from the subtle manipulations I now realized had been present for years. It would be a long road to healing, but for the first time since discovering that initial suspicious transfer, I believed we would find our way through. 3 days after the FBI raid, I found myself sitting in a sterile meeting room at the Federal Detention Center where Michael was being held pending his arraignment. I hadn't planned to see him, had in fact specifically told Diane I wanted no contact, But a persistent call from his court-appointed attorney had changed my mind. He has information about additional assets you're unaware of, the lawyer had explained. He's willing to disclose their location in exchange for a conversation with you. So here I was, waiting for the man who had planned my death, wondering what possible assets could be worth this encounter. The door opened, and Michael entered in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front of him, escorted by a guard. The transformation was jarring, his normally impeccable appearance replaced by hollow eyes and disheveled hair. "Rebecca," he said, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for coming." The guard positioned himself by the door as Michael sat across from me, the metal table between us suddenly seeming inadequate as a barrier. "Your lawyer said you have information about hidden assets," I stated flatly, avoiding any personal opening. Michael nodded, studying my face. "Before we get to that, how are the kids?" The audacity of his concern ignited a flash of anger. "Don't," I warned. "Don't pretend you care about them now, not after what you've done." "I do care," he insisted. "Everything I did was, if you say it was for them, I will walk out of here right now," I interrupted, my voice deadly quiet. "Planning my murder was for them? Stealing their college fund was for them?" Michael flinched at the word murder. "You don't understand," he began. "I understand perfectly," I replied. "I've seen the emails about the Costa Rica trip. I've seen the life insurance policy. I've seen the second identities and the property in Bermuda." His shoulders slumped. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How was it supposed to happen? Michael? Was I supposed to die quietly? Were the children supposed to grieve their mother, never knowing their father arranged it?" His eyes refused to meet mine. "There's a safe deposit box," he said instead of answering. "At International Trust, box 7342. The key is hidden in my golf bag, inside the handle of the putter." "What's in it?" "Diamonds, about $600,000 worth, and bearer bonds valued at approximately $1.2 million. I stared at him, incredulous. "You hid almost $2 million in a safe deposit box while simultaneously draining our children's college fund?" "The safe deposit box was an insurance policy," he explained, "in case something went wrong with the larger operation. The diamonds and bonds can't be traced." "Unlike the money you transferred to Vanessa," I observed coldly. Michael's jaw tightened. "That was a calculated risk. We needed liquid funds to secure the properties." "We?" I repeated. "You and your girlfriend? Or you and the entire Kingsley operation?" "It's more complicated than you know, Rebecca." He leaned forward. "Kingsley was just the start. We had connections to banking operations in 6 countries, investment funds, political campaigns." "Stop," I cut him off. "I don't want to hear about how impressive your criminal enterprise was. I want to know why. Why risk everything? Our marriage, your relationship with our children, your career, your freedom, for this?" For the first time, something like genuine emotion flickered across Michael's face. "It started small. Edward approached me about helping some clients move funds offshore. Perfectly legal tax minimization strategies. Then the amounts got larger, the clients more demanding. By the time I realized we'd crossed into illegal territory, I was already implicated." "And Vanessa? Was she part of it from the beginning?" A painful smile twisted his lips. "Vanessa was Edward's protégé before she was my whatever we were. She specializes in creating financial architectures that obscure ownership. When I raised concerns about some transactions, Edward assigned her to work with me. To keep me in line, I realize now." "And the affair?" Michael's eyes finally met mine. "That wasn't planned, but it happened. And then it became useful to the operation. A relationship that gave us reason to meet regularly, to travel together." "How convenient," I said bitterly. "And the plan to kill me? Was that useful to the operation too?" He flinched, as if I'd struck him. That wasn't... I never would have... The FBI has the emails, Michael. The accident arranged for Costa Rica. The life insurance policy. Michael's hands trembled slightly. Those discussions were theoretical, a contingency that Edward insisted we consider. I never intended to go through with it. I studied the man I had once loved, searching for any truth in his words. You expect me to believe that? After everything? No, he admitted quietly. I don't expect you to believe anything I say, but it's the truth. I got caught up in something bigger than I anticipated, and by the time I wanted out, they had too. Much leverage. The plan for Costa Rica was Edward's idea. I was stalling, trying to find another solution. Something in his tone gave me pause. Not because I believed him, but because I recognized the cadence of his half-truths. The same pattern he'd used when explaining late nights at the office or missed family dinners. Even if that's true, I said carefully, you still transferred our savings to Vanessa. You still participated in a massive financial fraud. You still betrayed everything we built together. Yes, he acknowledged. And I'll pay for those choices for the rest of my life. The guard stepped forward. 5 minutes left. Michael straightened. The safe deposit box, the contents are clean. They were purchased with inheritance money from my grandfather years ago. I've signed documentation authorizing you to access it. The children should have that money at least. I'll need to verify that with the FBI, I said. I'm not touching anything that might be connected to your crimes. He nodded wearily. I understand. There's one more thing. He slid a folded paper across the table. Account numbers for 3 offshore accounts in the Caymans. About $900,000 total. The passwords are our children's birthdays, in sequence. The FBI doesn't know about these yet. I took the paper without opening it. Why are you giving me this? Because despite what you believe, I do love our children. And because I know what's coming, decades in federal prison at minimum, this money could secure their future, your future. By making me complicit in hiding the proceeds of your crimes? A flash of the old Michael, calculating, strategic, crossed his face. The accounts were established before any illegal activity. They contain only my legitimate bonuses from the past 5 years. You can have the FBI verify that if you don't believe me. The guard stepped forward again. Time's up. Michael stood, expression suddenly urgent. Rebecca, be careful. Kingsley's operation had powerful protectors. The FBI has most of us, but not everyone involved has been identified. Watch for unusual activities, unexplained contacts. As the guard moved to escort him out, Michael added, change the security system codes. And Rebecca, I am sorry. Not that I got caught, but for what I did to our family. The children deserve better. I watched him leave, his words echoing in my mind. Was it another manipulation? A genuine warning? After so many lies, I couldn't trust my judgment where he was concerned. Outside the detention center, I called Agent Donovan explaining about the safe deposit box and offshore accounts. We'll verify the origins of these funds, he promised. If they're clean, as he claims, we'll work to release them to you as the children's guardian. And his warning about Kingsley's protectors? Donovan's brief hesitation was telling. We're pursuing all connections to the Kingsley operation. It would be prudent to maintain security precautions for the time being. Over the following weeks, a new reality took shape. Michael's arraignment resulted in him being held without bail, the evidence of false identities and international properties making him an extreme flight risk. Vanessa, Edward Kingsley, and the other executives faced similar charges. Media coverage was intense. Financial advisor Love Triangle reveals massive fraud, screamed one headline. Husband's deadly plan foiled by wife's quick thinking, declared another. Reporters camped outside our home until Diane secured a restraining order. The FBI confirmed. Michael's claims about the safe deposit box contents, purchased years before any illegal activity began at Kingsley. The offshore accounts proved more complicated. While the original deposits were legitimate bonuses, later transactions suggested commingling with questionable funds. The court froze those accounts pending further investigation. I met with a child psychologist to develop strategies for supporting the twins through this crisis. We sold our house, too many memories, too much media attention, and moved to a secure apartment building closer to Jennifer's home. The twins transferred to a private school with experience handling children in high-profile situations. 6 weeks after Michael's arrest, I received an unexpected call from Agent Donovan. "Mrs. Chen, are you somewhere you can speak privately?" I stepped into my home office, closing the door. "What's happened?" "We've uncovered something concerning," he said, his voice grave. "One of the accounts linked to Kingsley shows regular payments to a senior official at Granite Trust Bank, specifically someone in the fraud prevention department." My blood chilled. Stanley Winters? The branch manager who helped me freeze our accounts? No, someone higher up. But here's what's troubling. The payments continued after the arrests. In fact, there was a large transfer 2 days ago, originating from an account we hadn't previously connected to the scheme. "What does that mean?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "It means not everyone involved in this operation is in custody," Donovan confirmed. "We believe at least one significant player remains active, and given the timing of this payment, they may have interests that conflict with the investigation. Or with witnesses," I added quietly. "Precisely. We're increasing surveillance on your location, and I'd recommend limiting your movements for the next few days while we pursue this lead." After ending the call, I checked the security system, then went to the twins' room where they were completing homework. Their resilience continued to amaze me. Despite everything, they were adapting, healing, finding moments of joy. I watched them from the doorway, their heads bent together over a science project, and felt a fierce resolve harden within me. Whatever hidden threats still lurked in the shadows of Michael's criminal associations, I would protect our children. I would rebuild our lives. And I would ensure that the full truth about Kingsley's operations came to light, no matter who else might be implicated. My phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "You think it's over? This goes deeper than you know. Back off while you still can." Instead of fear, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Whoever had sent this didn't understand what they were dealing with. They saw a betrayed wife, a single mother overwhelmed by circumstance. What they failed to recognize was that I had already survived the worst betrayal imaginable. I had uncovered my husband's financial fraud, exposed his affair, and thwarted his deadly plans. I had frozen his accounts while collecting evidence that brought down an entire criminal enterprise. I texted Agent Donovan. "Just received a threat. Tracing the number now. Let's meet tomorrow. I have some ideas about who might still be involved." The game wasn't over, but neither was I. The morning after receiving the threatening text, I met Agent Donovan at a secure FBI location. The suburban office building looked unremarkable from the outside, intentionally so, but inside was a hive of activity dedicated to the Kingsley investigation. "We've traced the number," Donovan said without preamble, leading me to a conference room where maps and photographs covered the walls. "It's a burner phone purchased with cash at a convenience store in Cambridge 3 days ago. Security footage shows the buyer wearing a cap and sunglasses, deliberately obscuring their face. So we don't know who sent it," I concluded. "Not yet, but the timing is significant." 3 days ago, we requested records from Archer Capital, an investment firm that appears in Kingsley's transaction history multiple times. "You think someone at Archer is involved?" Donovan nodded. "It's a strong possibility. Archer managed several of the offshore accounts that Kingsley used to move funds. Their compliance officer, James Harrington, had regular contact with both Edward Kingsley and your husband." He pinned a photograph to the board, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s with silver hair and an air of authority. "Harrington. Has political connections, sits on several influential boards, and lives well beyond what his official salary should support. Donovan continued. We've been building a parallel investigation, but until now, we've kept it separate from the Kingsley case. And now? Now, someone's worried enough about our interest in Archer to threaten you directly. That tells us we're on the right track. I studied the photographs and financial diagrams covering the walls. Where do I fit into this? I've told you everything I know about Michael's activities. Donovan exchanged glances with another agent before answering. Your husband has agreed to cooperate with our investigation in exchange for consideration during sentencing. Yesterday, he provided detailed testimony about Archer Capital's role in the scheme. And you think this threat is related to Michael's testimony? It's likely. Someone wants to send a message to you and possibly to Michael through you. They want to stop the investigation from expanding beyond Kingsley. I considered this. What does Michael say about James Harrington? That's where it gets interesting, Donovan replied, pulling out a transcript. According to Michael, Harrington was more than just a business associate. He was Edward Kingsley's mentor, the person who originally taught him how to structure these types of financial operations. Michael claims Harrington has been running similar schemes for over 20 years with different front companies. The scale of the operation was staggering. What had begun as my discovery of Michael's betrayal had expanded into something that could potentially bring down a decades-long financial criminal enterprise. What do you need from me? I asked. Your safety is our priority, Donovan assured me. But we also believe you may have information you don't realize is significant. Michael mentioned a dinner party at your home about 18 months ago. Harrington was among the guests. Do you recall this event? I cast my mind back. Yes, it was for Michael's promotion to the compliance committee. About a dozen people from his professional circle attended. Did Harrington say or do anything that seemed unusual? I was about to say no when a memory surfaced. He asked for a tour of the house. I thought it was just politeness, but he seemed particularly interested. In Michael's home office, he commented on the built-in safe behind the bookshelf, asked if we kept anything valuable there. Donovan leaned forward. Did Michael show him the safe? Yes, he even opened it, showed off some rare coins his grandfather had left him. Michael was always eager to impress Harrington. Was anyone else present during this interaction? I concentrated. Vanessa was there. She made a joke about men and their toys. And there was another man. I can't recall his name, but he was introduced as Harrington's associate. Donovan slid a photograph across the table. Could this be him? The image showed a thin-faced man with sharp features. Yes, that's him. Who is he? Victor Mercer. Former intelligence operative. Now works as a private security consultant. Specializes in electronic surveillance. A chill ran down my spine. You think they were surveilling us? In our home? It's possible. Did you notice any unusual electronic issues after that party? Computer glitches, phone problems, strange noises on the line? Nothing specific, but... I stopped as another memory surfaced. About a month after that dinner, Michael insisted on renovating the home office. New furniture, new electronics, even had the walls repainted. He said it was a gift to me, since I handled our family finances from there. Donovan's expression darkened. We need to have your new apartment swept immediately. If they planted devices in your previous home, they may have found a way to do the same at your current residence. Within hours, a technical team had combed through my apartment while the twins were at school. The results were disturbing. A sophisticated listening device embedded in my laptop's power adapter, and another in the kitchen phone. These are professional grade, the tech specialist explained, showing me the tiny devices. Military-level technology, not commercially available. How long have they been there? I asked, feeling violated. Based on the serial numbers, they were manufactured about 3 weeks ago. They were likely planted shortly after you moved in, which meant someone had broken into our apartment, our secure, supposedly safe new home. and installed surveillance equipment without my knowledge. The threats are escalating, Donovan observed grimly. We need to move you and the children to a more secure location immediately. By nightfall, the twins and I had been relocated to a safe house in the suburbs with round-the-clock FBI protection. I watched as Noah and Ellie explored the unfamiliar space, trying to make an adventure of what was, in reality, a frightening disruption to the stability I'd been working so hard to rebuild. Is this because of Daddy? Ellie asked quietly as I tucked her into bed in the strange room. Sort of, I answered carefully. Daddy's work involved some people who aren't very nice. The police are helping us stay safe while they find these people. Are the bad people going to hurt us? Noah's voice trembled slightly. No, sweetheart. All these people are here to make sure we're safe. I gestured to the agents stationed throughout the house. This is just temporary until the police finish their work. After the children fell asleep, I met with Donovan in the safe house's kitchen. What's our next step? I can't keep the children in protective custody indefinitely. We're accelerating our investigation into Archer Capital, he explained. Based on Michael's testimony and the evidence we've gathered, we're preparing to execute search warrants at their offices and Harrington's residence within the next 48 hours. And then, if we find what we expect to find, we'll have enough to bring charges against Harrington and his associates. That should neutralize the immediate threat to you and your family. I nodded, exhausted but resolute. There's something I haven't told you. Something Michael mentioned during our meeting that seemed odd at the time. Donovan waited expectantly. He specifically asked about a book from his office, a first edition of The Wealth of Nations that belonged to his grandfather. He wanted to make sure it was properly stored during the move. The thing is, we don't have that book. I've never seen it in our home. A code, perhaps? That's what I thought, I agreed. What if it's not just about financial records? What if Michael and Kingsley had insurance policies, evidence against people like Harrington that they kept as protection? Donovan considered this. Where would such evidence be hidden? The safe deposit box, I realized suddenly. We recovered the diamonds and bearer bonds, but did anyone check for anything else? A hidden compartment? A false bottom? I'll have the team re-examine the box immediately, Donovan said, already reaching for his phone. The next morning brought confirmation. A micro SD card had been discovered concealed within the lining of the safe deposit box. Its contents were explosive. Recorded conversations between Harrington, Kingsley, and several high-ranking executives at financial institutions and regulatory agencies, discussing in explicit detail their coordinated efforts to manipulate markets, launder funds, and circumvent regulations. This changes everything, Donovan told me when he arrived at the safe house with the news. The recordings implicate at least 3 federal regulators and a deputy finance minister. We're coordinating with multiple agencies now to ensure synchronized arrests. How did Michael get these recordings? According to the metadata, they span the last 2 years. It appears your husband was quietly building an insurance policy of his own, protection in case Kingsley or Harrington ever turned on him. I felt a strange mix of emotions, disgust at Michael's criminal activities, but a grudging acknowledgement of his strategic foresight. Even as he participated in the scheme, he'd been preparing for its potential collapse. Will this help his case? I asked, unsure how I felt about the possibility. Significantly, Donovan confirmed. This kind of evidence against higher-level players will almost certainly result in a reduced sentence. Part of me resented that Michael might escape the full consequences of his actions, but another part, the part that saw the twins asking about their father with confusion and sadness, felt a complicated relief. Later that afternoon, as I helped the children with their homework in the safe house living room, my phone rang with a call from Jennifer. "Rebecca," she began, her voice tense, "there's someone at my house asking about you. A woman who says she used to work with Michael. Did she give a name? Christine Dawson. Says it's urgent. Something about evidence that could help you. I didn't recognize the name, But that meant nothing. Michael had many colleagues I'd never met. Don't tell her anything, I instructed. I'll have the FBI check her out. When I relayed this information to Donovan, his team quickly identified Christine Dawson as a former administrator in Kingsley's offshore operations division. She had left the firm 6 months ago, ostensibly for a position at another company. Could be legitimate, Donovan mused. Or it could be another attempt to locate you. Let's arrange a controlled meeting. The following day, under heavy surveillance, and with agents positioned throughout the cafe, I met Christine Dawson, a nervous-looking woman in her early 30s who constantly scanned our surroundings. Thank you for meeting me, she began quietly. I've been trying to come forward for months, but I was afraid. After I saw the news about the arrests, I knew I had to do something. Come forward about what? She glanced around again before sliding a USB drive across the table. Financial records that never made it into the official Kingsley systems. Transactions that connect Harrington directly to accounts in Liechtenstein, Singapore, and Malta. I was responsible for reconciling these records, manually, offline, to keep them out of the main database. Why are you giving this to me instead of the authorities? Because the authorities have leaks, she said bluntly. I reported suspicious activities through proper channels twice. Both times, evidence disappeared and witnesses were pressured to recant. The third time, I received a visit from Victor Mercer warning me about unfortunate accidents that befall uncooperative employees. The same man who had likely planted surveillance devices in my home. Why now? Christine met my eyes directly. Because you stood up to them. Because you protected yourself and your children instead of looking the other way like so many others did. And because I can't live with myself if I don't do something to stop these people. As I examined the USB drive in my palm, I realized that what had begun with a suspicious bank transfer had expanded into something that might help bring down a criminal network that had operated with impunity for decades. This won't be easy, I warned her. These people are dangerous. Christine nodded grimly. I know. But some things are worth the risk. I thought of my children, of the future I was fighting to secure for them, of the example I wanted to set about. Standing up to wrongdoing, even when it came from those closest to you. Yes, I agreed. Some things are. The data Christine Dawson provided proved even more valuable than we anticipated. The USB drive contained not just financial records, but detailed correspondence between Harrington and various officials, including time-stamped meeting notes, transaction approvals, and explicit discussions of how to avoid regulatory detection. This is the missing link, Agent Donovan declared as the FBI's financial crimes team analyzed the files. It connects Harrington directly to the money laundering operation and implicates at least 4 regulatory officials who helped conceal the activities. Within 48 hours, a multi-agency task force had been assembled, including representatives from the FBI, SEC, Treasury Department, and IRS. I watched from the periphery as they coordinated a complex operation targeting multiple locations simultaneously. We'll execute search warrants at 13 locations tomorrow morning, Donovan informed me. Archer Capital's offices, Harrington's residences, and the homes and offices of the implicated regulatory officials. Given the high-profile nature of these targets, we need absolute secrecy until the moment we move. What about Vanessa? I asked. Has she started cooperating like Michael? Donovan's expression was measured. Ms. Prescott has been more resistant. She maintained she was manipulated by Michael and Kingsley, despite evidence suggesting she was a willing and active participant. She's hoping for a jury's sympathy, I concluded. Playing the victim card. Exactly. But with the new evidence from Christine and the recordings Michael preserved, her defense is crumbling. We expect she'll reconsider her position soon. That evening, as I helped the twins with their science project at the safe house, I received an unexpected call from Diane. Rebecca, I've just received a settlement offer from Michael's attorney, she said without preamble. He's proposing a Complete financial separation that's heavily weighted in your favor. Full ownership of all legitimate assets. The children's college funds restored with interest. And additional compensation for emotional damages. What's the catch? I asked, immediately suspicious. He wants limited, supervised visitation rights with the children once he's served his sentence. And he's asking that you don't pursue personal civil charges against him beyond the divorce. I felt a complex wave of emotions. Part of me wanted Michael to suffer every possible consequence for his betrayal. Another part recognized that despite everything, he was still the twins' father. A relationship that would continue in some form regardless of my personal feelings. I need time to think about it, I told Diane. Let's see what happens with tomorrow's operation first. The following morning, I woke before dawn to find the safe house already buzzing with activity. Agents moved purposefully through the space, checking equipment and reviewing final details for the coordinated raids. We're moving on all targets at exactly 6 a.m., Donovan explained, showing me a map with 13 locations marked. Harrington is currently at his Beacon Hill residence. We have surveillance confirmation that he's on site. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of anticipation. This operation represented the culmination of a journey that had begun with a single suspicious bank transfer. A thread that, once pulled, had unraveled an entire network of financial crimes. At precisely 6 a.m., the raids began. From the security of the safe house, I watched multiple live feeds as FBI teams entered buildings across Boston and beyond. The operation at Archer Capital was particularly dramatic. Agents swarming into the prestigious firm's offices while early arriving employees looked on in shock. The feed from Harrington's residence showed the silver-haired executive being led, out in handcuffs, his normally composed demeanor shattered by the reality of his arrest. Unlike Michael, who had seemed diminished by his captivity, Harrington maintained an air of indignation, as if the very concept of consequences was beneath him. By noon, the scale of the operation's success was becoming clear. 11 arrests had been made, including Harrington, 3 regulatory officials, and several executives from financial institutions that had facilitated the money laundering operation. Massive quantities of documents and electronic evidence had been seized, with early reviews already identifying additional co-conspirators. What happens now? I asked Donovan when he returned to the safe house, looking exhausted but satisfied. Now we build the cases. With the evidence we've secured today, combined with Michael's testimony and Christine's records, we're looking at multiple prosecutions for financial crimes, corruption, and potentially obstruction of justice. And the threat to my family? Significantly reduced, he assured me. With Harrington and his key associates in custody, the immediate danger has largely been neutralized. We'll maintain security precautions until we're absolutely certain, but you should be able to return to your apartment within a few days. That afternoon, I had a difficult conversation with the twins, trying to explain in age-appropriate terms what was happening and why it might soon be safe to go home. The police caught the people who were connected to Daddy's mistakes, I explained gently. They won't be able to bother us anymore. Will Daddy be coming home too? Noah asked hopefully. My heart ached at his innocent question. No, sweetheart. Daddy still has to face consequences for his actions, but he loves you very much, and we'll talk about ways you can stay connected with him. Later, as the children watched a movie with one of the younger agents who had bonded with them, I received a call from Rachel. Are you watching the news? She asked urgently. No, we've been focused on the raids. Why? Victor Mercer was found dead in his apartment an hour ago. Apparent suicide, but the timing is suspicious, don't you think? I felt a chill. Mercer, Harrington's security expert, the man who had likely planted surveillance devices in my home, dead, just hours after the coordinated arrests. That's not a coincidence, I said quietly. My thoughts exactly. Someone's tying up loose ends. I immediately relayed this information to Donovan, who shared my concern. This suggests there may be players we haven't identified yet. people with enough power and resources to reach Mercer despite the operation's security. Could Mercer have left evidence that might identify them? We've dispatched a team to process his apartment. If there's anything to find, we'll find it. The following day brought another significant development. Vanessa Prescott, perhaps seeing the mounting evidence and the fate of her co-conspirators, finally agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. She's providing details about the entire operation, Donovan informed me, including information about clients and financial institutions we weren't previously aware of. It seems Ms. Prescott kept her own insurance policy, documentation of every transaction she facilitated. Smart, I acknowledged grudgingly. She always struck me as calculating. Indeed, her testimony, combined with the evidence we've already secured, should ensure convictions for the principal figures in this case. 3 days after the raids, with the immediate threat deemed sufficiently reduced, the twins and I were cleared to return to our apartment. The relief of returning to our own space was tempered by new security measures, a professionally installed alarm system, panic buttons in multiple rooms, and regular drive-bys from both local police and FBI vehicles. In the weeks that followed, I worked to re-establish a sense of normalcy for the children. They returned to school, resumed their activities, and slowly the shadows in their eyes began to fade. We started sessions with a family therapist who specialized in trauma and betrayal, creating a safe space for the twins to process their complex feelings about their father. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings advanced with surprising speed. The evidence against Harrington and his associates was overwhelming, leading several defendants to seek plea deals rather than face trial. Michael's cooperation continued to be valuable to prosecutors, strengthening his position for sentencing considerations. 2 months after the raids, I received a call from Agent Donovan with unexpected news. "We've completed our analysis of the financial records," he began, "and we've identified additional assets connected to the Kingsley-Harrington operation that can be recovered for victims." "That's good news for the people they defrauded," I said. "Yes, but there's something specific to your situation. The analysis of your family accounts revealed that Michael had been siphoning funds even earlier than you discovered, small amounts dating back almost 5 years, totaling approximately $140,000. Felt a renewed sense of betrayal. Even before the Kingsley operation had intensified, even before Vanessa, Michael had been stealing from our family. However, Donovan continued, we've also identified assets purchased with those funds that can be liquidated and returned to you. A vacation property in Maine and a small art collection, together worth about $230,000. The revelation prompted me to revisit my conversation with Diane about Michael's settlement offer. After careful consideration, I decided to accept the financial terms while maintaining strict conditions for any future contact with the children. He'll be required to complete extensive therapy and parenting classes before any visitation begins. Diane confirmed after finalizing the agreement. And all visits will be supervised indefinitely. Your priority is protecting the children, and this agreement accomplishes that while providing financial security. 6 months after I'd first discovered the suspicious transfer from our joint account, I found myself sitting in the conference room of Diane's law firm, signing the final divorce papers. The document formalized the end of my marriage to Michael, Chen, and established the framework for our future interactions, limited, structured, and focused exclusively on the children's well-being. As I signed my name on the last page, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would still hold challenges, but for the first time in months, I could glimpse a future not defined by betrayal and danger. Outside Diane's office, the autumn air held a crispness that matched my mood. Clear, sharp, invigorating. I walked to the nearby park where I'd arranged to meet Jennifer and the twins after their school day. Watching them play on the swings, their laughter carrying across the playground, I felt a surge of gratitude for their resilience and for the support system that had helped us weather this storm. My phone chimed with a text from Rachel. Just heard from my contact. Harrington's taking a plea deal. 20 years minimum. Justice served. I smiled slightly. Justice was being served, though no punishment could truly compensate for the damage done, not just to me and my children, but to all the people affected by the financial crimes Michael and his associates had committed. As I watched the twins playing, I considered how to move forward from here. The financial security provided by the settlement and recovered assets gave us options. Perhaps it was time to make a fresh start somewhere new, away from the memories and media attention that still occasionally flared in Boston, but those were decisions for another day. For now, I was content to observe my children enjoying a moment of uncomplicated happiness, secure in the knowledge that I had done everything possible to protect them, not just their financial future, but their safety and emotional well-being. When the greatest threat had come from within our own family, I had found the strength to face it. When the person I trusted most had betrayed that trust in the most profound way, I had relied on my own capabilities to navigate the crisis. And when powerful forces had tried to intimidate me into silence, I had instead helped bring them to justice. The twins spotted me and ran over, faces flushed with excitement, eager to share details of their day. As I embraced them, I realized that while Michael's betrayal had shattered the life we'd built, it had also revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. Strengths that would serve us well as we built something new. 1 year after freezing, Michael's accounts and setting in motion the events that would dismantle the Kingsley Harrington criminal enterprise, I stood on the deck of our new lakeside home, watching the twins race along the shoreline with their newly adopted puppy. The decision to leave Boston had come gradually. As the trials of Harrington and his associates dominated financial news, the constant reminders of our connection to the case became wearing. The twins faced subtle but persistent curiosity from classmates and parents. And while the settlement from Michael and the recovered assets had provided financial security, the emotional toll of remaining in a city filled with memories had become increasingly clear. So we'd moved, not in fear or flight, but in a deliberate choice to build something new. The lake house in western Massachusetts had been an unexpected find, a foreclosure property with good bones and spectacular views. Using my settlement funds, I'd renovated it into a spacious, light-filled home that bore no resemblance to the life we'd shared with Michael. My phone rang, interrupting my reflections. It was Agent Donovan, now just Mark, as our professional. Relationship had evolved into something approaching friendship over the months of cooperation. "Rebecca, good news," he began. "The last of the regulatory officials involved in the Harrington case took a plea deal this morning. 15 years, no possibility of parole before 12. "That's everyone then," I observed, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and weariness. "All the major players accounted for." "All the ones we identified, yes," Mark agreed. His cautious phrasing didn't escape me. "You still think there might be others?" In cases like this, there's always the possibility of connections we haven't uncovered. But with the principals serving substantial sentences and the financial networks dismantled, any remaining associates have lost their infrastructure. After we disconnected, I returned to my laptop on the deck table, where I'd been working on the final chapters of my book. Titled, "Following the Money: How Financial Fraud Destroyed My Marriage and Revealed a Criminal Empire," it chronicled my journey from discovering Michael's betrayal to helping bring down the Kingsley Harrington operation. The publisher had been enthusiastic from the first pitch, offering an advance that supplemented our financial cushion. But more importantly, writing the book had become part of my healing process, a way to reclaim my story and perhaps help others recognize signs I had missed. Jennifer had driven up from Boston for the weekend, bringing groceries and city gossip. She emerged from the house with iced tea and joined me on the deck. "How's the book coming?" she asked, settling into an Adirondack chair. "Almost finished. Just working on the epilogue now, the reflective part about lessons learned and moving forward." Jennifer watched the twins playing by the lake. They seem happy here, more relaxed. They are, I agreed. The new school has been wonderful. Small classes, supportive teachers, and the distance from everything associated with Michael has helped them process without constant reminders. Have they asked about seeing him? I nodded. Occasionally. His sentencing is next month, and they know that means he'll be gone for a while. We've discussed the possibility of letters once he's settled into whichever facility they assign him. The reality of Michael's situation remained difficult to discuss with the children. His extensive cooperation had resulted in a reduced recommendation, 7 years instead of the 20+ he might have faced otherwise. Still, explaining to 8-year-olds why their father would be absent for most of their childhood presented ongoing challenges. Any word from Vanessa? Jennifer asked, changing the subject. Nothing direct. Rachel mentioned she entered witness protection after the initial trials. Apparently, her testimony about international clients created some significant threats. I felt little sympathy for Vanessa. While Michael had betrayed me personally, Vanessa had violated both my trust as a friend and her professional responsibilities, all while calculating how to benefit from my family's destruction. The school called about Noah yesterday, I said, watching my son splash at the water's edge. They've recommended him for advanced math classes. Apparently, he's showing exceptional aptitude for patterns and problem solving. Like his mother. Jennifer smiled. Have you thought any more about going back to work? You were brilliant at financial investigations. I had been considering my professional future. The substantial settlement provided financial stability, but I missed the intellectual challenge of my former career. More importantly, I wanted my children to see me engaged in meaningful work, demonstrating resilience and purpose after trauma. I've had some conversations with a private investigation firm that specializes in financial crimes, I admitted. They're interested in bringing me on as a consultant, working remotely with flexible hours. It would let me use my skills while maintaining our new lifestyle here. That sounds perfect, Jennifer enthused. When would you start? Nothing's finalized yet. I want to finish the book first and get the kids settled into their fall semester before taking on new commitments. As evening approached, we called the twins in for dinner. The normalcy of our family meal, Jennifer teasing the children, the puppy begging for scraps, discussion of weekend plans, felt like a precious achievement after the chaos of the past. Yerbon. Later, after the children were asleep, Jennifer and I sat on the deck with glasses of wine, watching stars emerge over the lake. I ran into Stanley Winters last week, Jennifer mentioned casually. The bank manager who helped you freeze. The accounts. How is he? Fine, though he's moved to a different branch. He asked about you, seemed genuinely concerned about how you and the kids were doing. I smiled slightly. He was one of the good ones. Took a professional risk helping me without a court order. I should send him a copy of the book when it's published. You know who else asked about you? That Treasury agent who debriefed you after Harrington's arrest. Andrew something? Andrew Sullivan, I supplied. He was part of the task force that coordinated with the FBI. That's him. Mentioned he's been following the case outcomes. Said something about how they've used your experience to update their training protocols for identifying financial fraud involving family assets. The idea that my ordeal might help others detect similar schemes before they progress too far was gratifying. If even one family could be spared what we had endured, some meaning could be extracted from our suffering. I had another dream about Michael last night, I confessed, staring out at the dark water. We were back in our old house, and everything seemed normal. Then suddenly I noticed he was packing a suitcase, saying he had to leave, and when I tried to stop him, my feet wouldn't move. Jennifer nodded sympathetically. The therapist said those would continue for a while. Processing trauma isn't linear. I know. It's just strange. Some days I can go without thinking about him at all. Others, something triggers a memory. Good. Or bad. And it's like being pulled back in time. That's normal, Becca. You were together for 12 years, had children together, built a life. The fact that it ended badly doesn't erase all that history. The conversation lapsed into comfortable silence. In the distance, a loon called across the lake, its haunting cry echoing through the darkness. "You know what still gets me sometimes?" I said finally. Not just that he betrayed me, but how thoroughly he underestimated me. He really believed I would either remain oblivious or be too intimidated to act once I discovered what was happening. His mistake, Jennifer said, raising her glass in a small toast. One of many. The following morning, I rose early and took my coffee down to the dock, watching mist rise from the lake's surface as the sun created the eastern hills. The quiet beauty of the setting reinforced the rightness of our decision to relocate here, a place with no associations to our past life, where we could truly begin anew. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Final settlement funds transferred. Today. All accounts closed. Officially done. Another chapter closed. The practical aftermath of my marriage to Michael, the division of assets, the legal entanglements, the financial separations, was complete. What remained were the emotional connections that could never be fully severed while we shared children, and the ongoing process of helping the twins navigate their relationship with a father who had betrayed their family, but still loved them, in his complicated way. As I sipped my coffee, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. A suspicious bank transfer had been the first thread that, when pulled, unraveled an entire tapestry of deception. My decision to freeze Michael's accounts rather than confront him immediately had been instinctive, a return to my professional training when personal emotions might have led me astray. That single choice had not only protected our remaining assets, but had set in motion the events that would ultimately expose a sophisticated criminal enterprise. I thought about the woman I had been before all this, capable but somewhat complacent, confident in the stability of my marriage and family life. The woman I had become was different, more vigilant certainly, but also more aware of my own strength and resourcefulness. I had faced betrayal, danger, and uncertainty, emerging not unscathed, but undeniably intact. The twins appeared on the path from the house, still in pajamas, eager to show me a frog they'd spotted near the shore. As I joined their excitement over this small discovery, I realized that in focusing on all we had lost, I sometimes overlooked what we had gained, a deeper appreciation for stability, a more intentional approach to building security, and most importantly, the unshakable knowledge that we could weather profound difficulties and still find joy in simple moments. Later that day, as Jennifer packed to return to Boston, she paused to embrace me tightly. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "Not everyone could have handled what you've been through with such grace. I had help," I reminded her. "You, Rachel, Diane, the FBI team. I wasn't alone." "No, but you were the one who had to make the hard choices. You were the one who had to decide whether to fight or surrender when you discovered what Michael was doing. And you chose to fight, not just for yourself, but for your children, and ultimately for all the others who might have been victimized if the scheme had continued." After Jennifer departed, I returned to my laptop to finish the epilogue of my book. Finding the right words to conclude such a complex story had proven challenging, but as I looked out over the lake where my children were now building a sandcastle, the closing thoughts finally crystallized. Financial fraud leaves a dual legacy, I wrote. There is the obvious damage, the stolen funds, the shattered trust, the legal consequences. But there is also a hidden cost in how it changes your perception of the world. You learn to question what once seemed certain, to seek verification where you once assumed truth, to recognize that even those closest to you may hide aspects of themselves you never suspected. Yet, in that vigilance, there is also power. When I discovered my husband's betrayal and decided to freeze his accounts, rather than confront him directly. I reclaimed agency in a situation designed to render me powerless. That single decision, to act strategically rather than reactively, ultimately protected not just my family's financial future, but potentially prevented others from falling victim to the same scheme. The journey from betrayal to resolution is neither quick nor linear. There are setbacks, moments of doubt, and lingering questions that may never find complete answers. But there is also the opportunity to rebuild, not by returning to what was lost, but by creating something new that honors the wisdom gained through difficult experience. My children will grow up knowing that their father made grave mistakes that carried serious consequences, but they will also grow up seeing their mother move forward with purpose and resilience. They will understand that while we cannot control the actions of others, we can always choose how we respond, with courage, with integrity, and with the determination to create security even after it has been shattered. That, perhaps, is the most valuable asset I managed to preserve when I froze those accounts on that March afternoon. Not just our financial resources, but the opportunity to show my children that even in our darkest moments, we have the capacity to fight for what matters most. I saved the document and closed my laptop, feeling a sense of completion. The book, like our new home, represented a milestone in our journey, not an ending, but a foundation for whatever would come next. 3 years after freezing Michael's accounts, I stood at the back of a crowded bookstore in downtown Boston, watching as attendees filled every available seat. My memoir had been published 6 months earlier to unexpected commercial success and critical acclaim. The publisher had organized a 10-city tour, and Boston, the city where everything had begun, was the final stop. Jennifer squeezed my arm supportively as the store manager approached the microphone to introduce me. In the front row sat Rachel and Diane, along with several agents from the FBI financial crimes team who had become unexpected allies during the investigation. Mark Donovan had flown in from Washington specially for this event, having been promoted after the successful prosecution of the Kingsley Harrington network. "It is my pleasure to introduce Rebecca Chen," the manager began, whose book Following the Money has become not just a compelling personal memoir, but an important resource for understanding financial fraud and its impact on families. Please welcome Rebecca. As I approached the podium, the familiar nervousness gave way to a calm confidence I'd developed over months of speaking engagements. I surveyed the audience, mostly women, many taking notes, some with copies of my book, already dog-eared and highlighted. 3 years ago, I began, I discovered a suspicious transfer from my family's savings account. What started as a simple question about missing money ultimately exposed a sophisticated financial crime network, ended my marriage, and forced me to rebuild my life from the foundation up. For the next 40 minutes, I shared my story. The initial discovery, the strategic decision to freeze the accounts rather than confront Michael immediately, the gradual unraveling of the broader conspiracy, and the aftermath of rebuilding a life for myself and my children. Throughout the presentation, I emphasized the practical lessons I'd learned about financial vigilance and the emotional journey of recovering from betrayal. The most common question I receive, I concluded, is whether I regret discovering the truth. Wouldn't ignorance have been easier? And the answer is always the same. Knowledge, however painful, is ultimately freedom. By understanding what was happening to my family's finances, I was able to take action that not only protected our future, but helped bring to justice people who had victimized many others. The Q&A session that followed was lively, with audience members sharing their own experiences of financial betrayal and asking advice about protecting themselves. One woman's question particularly resonated. After everything you've been through, she asked, how do you ever trust anyone again? Especially with something as important as your financial security. I considered this carefully. Trust isn't binary, all or nothing. What I've learned is to trust thoughtfully. I balance faith in people with appropriate verification. I maintain financial independence alongside partnership. And most importantly, I trust my own instincts and abilities to handle whatever challenges arise. After the formal event concluded, I signed books and spoke individually with attendees. Many shared personal stories in hushed tones, discoveries of hidden debt, secret accounts, financial manipulation within relationships. I listened, offering what guidance I could while recognizing that each situation required its own unique approach. As the crowd thinned, a familiar figure approached the signing table, Stanley Winters, the bank manager who had extended the fraud hold on our accounts 3 years earlier. "Ms. Chen," he greeted me warmly. "Your book was extraordinary. I've recommended it to our entire financial crimes department." "Mr. Winters," I smiled, standing to shake his hand. "I've been hoping you might come tonight. Your willingness to help me when I had little more than suspicions made all the difference." "I was just doing my job," he demurred. "We both know you went beyond standard protocol," I countered. "You took a risk based on your professional judgment, and that decision helped protect my family's future." After the bookstore emptied, Jennifer, Rachel, Diane, and Mark joined me for dinner at an upscale restaurant overlooking Boston Harbor. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and reminiscences about the more absurd moments of the past 3 years. "Remember when we found the listening devices in your apartment?" Rachel recalled. "I've never seen anyone so coldly, furious. You just calmly asked the tech guys if you could keep one as a souvenir." "Evidence," I corrected with a smile. "Always preserve the evidence." As dessert arrived, Mark updated us on the broader impact of the Kingsley Harrington case. The regulatory reforms implemented as a result of this investigation have closed several loopholes used for financial crimes. At least 3 similar operations have been identified and disrupted using the patterns we established from your case. "What about the higher-level connections?" I asked. "Any progress identifying Harrington's political protectors?" Mark's expression grew more guarded. "Ongoing investigations, several promising leads, but nothing I can discuss publicly yet." I nodded, understanding the sensitivity. Throughout the process, there had been indications of connections reaching into regulatory agencies and possibly beyond, though proving those links had proven challenging. "And Michael?" Jennifer asked carefully. "Any updates?" "He's still at the minimum security facility in Pennsylvania," I replied. "He's teaching financial literacy classes to other inmates, apparently. The twins exchange letters with him monthly. We've discussed the possibility of supervised visits next year, depending on his continued good behavior and their therapist's recommendations." The complexity of managing my children's relationship with their father remained one of the most challenging aspects of our situation. While I had every reason to cut Michael out of my life completely, the twins still loved their father and needed to process their relationship with him in their own time and way. "How is your new position going?" Diane asked, changing the subject. 6 months earlier, I had accepted a role with a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating the public about financial fraud and supporting victims. As their director of education and outreach, I developed programs for vulnerable populations and consulted on cases involving family financial abuse. "It's fulfilling work," I acknowledged. "Using my experience to help others recognize warning signs I missed feels like creating meaning from something that could have been merely destructive." As dinner concluded and we prepared to part ways, Mark pulled me aside. "There's something you should know," he said quietly. "Vanessa Prescott left witness protection 3 months ago." A jolt of surprise ran through me. I thought the threats against her were considered serious. They were, but she apparently felt the restrictions were too limiting. She's changed her identity legally and relocated to the West Coast. "Should I be concerned?" I asked directly. Mark shook his head. "We don't believe so. She's maintaining a very low profile, working in an unrelated field. But I thought you should be aware, just as a precaution." I thanked him for the information, not entirely sure how I felt about it. Vanessa had been both architect and victim of her own downfall, a woman whose intelligence and ambition had been channeled into criminal enterprise rather than legitimate success. In some ways, she remained the most enigmatic figure in the entire saga. The following morning, before flying back to Massachusetts, I made an unplanned visit to our former neighborhood, the house where Michael and I had raised our children, hosted dinner parties, and presented the image of a perfect family to the world had been sold during the asset liquidation. New owners had painted the exterior a different color and landscaped the yard differently, erasing the visible traces of our life there. I felt surprisingly little as I gazed at the transformed property. No regret, no nostalgia, just a calm acknowledgement of a chapter closed. What had once been the center of my world was now simply a house where other people were creating their own stories. Back at the hotel, I received an unexpected email from Christine Dawson, the former Kingsley employee whose evidence had been so crucial to the case. After testifying, she had relocated and started a new career in technology. Her message was brief but meaningful. Just finished your book. Wanted you to know that your courage in confronting this situation gave me the strength to come forward. Some days I still look over my shoulder, but I never regret telling the truth. Thank you for showing that it's possible to rebuild. On the flight home, I reflected on how thoroughly my life had transformed since that March afternoon when I'd first noticed the suspicious transfer. My career had taken an unexpected new direction. My children were thriving in our lakeside community. I had developed financial security systems that gave me confidence in our future. And most importantly, I had discovered reserves of strength and resilience I might never have recognized without the crisis that forced me to draw upon them. When I landed, I drove directly to the twins' school for their science fair. Now 11 years old, they had collaborated on a project examining the mathematical patterns in nature, Noah focusing on the calculations and Ellie creating beautiful visual representations. Their teacher informed me they had won first place in their division. "Mom!" they exclaimed in unison when they spotted me. "We won! And Dr. Levine from the university wants to feature our project in a community science exhibition." I hugged them both, marveling at their enthusiasm and intellectual curiosity. Despite everything they had endured, the public exposure of their father's crimes, the upheaval of relocation, the adjustments to a new family structure, they continued to develop into confident, engaged individuals. That evening, as we celebrated their success with a special dinner at home, Noah grew suddenly thoughtful. "Mom, Jason at school said his parents were talking about Dad after they read your book. He asked me if my dad was a bad person." The question pierced my heart as it did every time the children sought to reconcile their own loving memories with the public narrative of their father as a criminal. "What did you tell him?" I asked gently. "I said that Dad made really bad choices that hurt people, and he's facing consequences for those choices. But that doesn't mean he was bad in every way or that he didn't love us." Noah looked at me uncertainly. "Is that right?" I nodded, swallowing past the lump in my throat. "That's exactly right, sweetheart. People are complicated. Your father did wrong things that caused serious harm, but that doesn't erase the good parts of him or the love he has for you both." Later, after the twins were asleep, I sat on the deck overlooking the moonlit lake. The night was clear, stars reflected perfectly in the still water. In this peaceful moment, the tumult of the past seemed almost like someone else's story, a dramatic film I had watched, rather than a reality I had lived. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark Donovan. "Thought you should know. Grand jury has returned indictments against 2 senior Treasury officials connected to Harrington. Arrests tomorrow. Your testimony made this possible." I smiled slightly at the news. The ripple effects of that initial frozen account continued to spread, creating accountability where there had been impunity. Though my personal journey had largely reached resolution, the broader implications of the case were still unfolding. The following week brought another significant milestone. a certified letter arrived from the federal prison in Pennsylvania, Michael's. Regular correspondence to the twins, but with an additional sealed envelope addressed to me. I hesitated before opening it, unsure what communication from my ex-husband could warrant after all this time. Inside was a handwritten letter, the familiar slant of Michael's writing bringing an unexpected rush of memory. Rebecca, I've read your book. The prison librarian ordered it after several inmates in my financial literacy class requested it. Strange to see our life deconstructed on the page, though you were more generous in your portrayal of me than I deserved. Won't ask for forgiveness. What I did is beyond that. But I want you to know that your actions saved more than our children's financial future. When you froze those accounts and began investigating, you halted a process that was spiraling increasingly out of control. The plans being discussed in those final months, had you not intervened when you did, would have endangered more lives than just yours. You were always the most principled person I knew. It's why Harrington insisted you be neutralized. He recognized that your moral compass couldn't be compromised or manipulated like so many others. In my worst moments, I considered that the greatest threat to our operation, now I recognize it, was your greatest strength. The twins are flourishing according to their letters. You've created stability from chaos, security from betrayal. I take no credit for the remarkable people they're becoming. That is entirely your achievement. I will serve my sentence and face whatever remains of my life afterward with the full understanding that my choices destroyed what could have been. Some debts can never be repaid. Michael, I folded the letter carefully and returned it to its envelope, uncertain how to feel about this unexpected communication. There was an honesty to it that rang true, yet Michael had proven himself a master of manipulation. Was this genuine remorse or another calculated gesture? Perhaps it didn't matter. I had long since stopped defining my life in relation to Michael's actions or motivations. His acknowledgement of my strength changed nothing about the reality I had built for myself and our children. The next morning, I received a call from my publisher. The foreign rights are selling beyond our expectations, she informed me excitedly. And there's serious interest from a production company about adapting the book for a limited series. That seems surreal, I admitted. When I started writing, it was just to process what had happened. I never imagined it would reach so many people. Your story resonates because it's ultimately about agency, not victimhood, she observed. You didn't just survive betrayal, you systematically dismantled the threat and rebuilt on your own terms. That's a narrative people need, especially those facing their own versions of financial betrayal. After ending the call, I took my coffee down to the lake's edge, where I often did my best thinking. The water lapped gently at the shore, creating a soothing rhythm that helped clarify my thoughts. 3 years ago, a single suspicious transaction had altered the trajectory of my life, exposing layers of deception I could never have imagined. What began as a simple act of financial self-protection, freezing accounts to preserve assets, had expanded into an investigation that ultimately brought down powerful figures who had operated with impunity for decades. The journey had cost me a marriage, a home, and the sense of security that comes from believing you know the people closest to you. But it had also given me unexpected gifts, deeper self-knowledge, stronger connections with those who stood by me, and the discovery that I possessed the resources to navigate even the most devastating betrayals. As I watched the sunlight dance across the water, I thought about the countless people who had reached out after reading my book, women and men who had faced their own versions of financial betrayal and found in my story the courage to take action. Their messages often expressed the same sentiment. If you could confront such a complex deception, perhaps I can face my situation too. That perhaps was the most meaningful outcome of this ordeal, the transformation of personal pain into a resource that might help others find their way through similar darkness. I finished my coffee and headed back toward the house, where the day's responsibilities awaited. The twins would need help preparing for their upcoming school camping trip. I had a video conference with my nonprofit team about a new educational initiative. Life continued to unfold with its everyday challenges and satisfactions. The past could neither be changed nor entirely forgotten, but it no longer defined my present or limited my future. What had begun with a husband transferring our savings to his girlfriend had ultimately revealed not just a criminal conspiracy, but my own capacity for resilience. That initial decision to freeze the accounts rather than confront Michael immediately had been instinctive, a return to my professional training when emotion might have led me astray. Now, with the perspective of time, I recognized it as the moment when I had reclaimed agency in a situation designed to render me powerless. Sometimes the most significant acts of courage don't announce themselves dramatically. They arrive as quiet choices made in ordinary moments, the decision to look closer when something seems wrong, to trust your instincts when logic can't explain your unease, to act deliberately rather than reactively when facing betrayal. 3 years ago, I had made such a choice, and though I could never have anticipated where that path would lead, I had no regrets about taking the first step. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.